Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome to the second of our boredom busting. We're all stuck at home and can't go out and going a bit stir crazy. Live hangouts. We had one of these last week for anybody who wasn't around and didn't pick it up. And we're going to try and do one of these for every week while we're all on lockdown. Keep in touch with each other. Keep in touch with the general news. Keep looking at chat. Feel free to join the conversation, chat with each other, chat with us. As there always are with these live streams, there's a slight delay between what we're talking about and where you're hearing it. So if you say something in chat, it might take a little bit of time for us to get back to you. So I am here with Sean Galligan. Sean, hi.
Hello, welcome again from Wisconsin, USA.
Good stuff. Sounds like you're all hooked up. And so now we've got double Simon. I was just about to say Simon seems to have frozen there, but you've logged back in on another account possibly. Can you hear us all right?
That's correct. Yeah. Wi-Fi in the just very silly buggers today.
Fantastic. Hang on. I'm gonna boot your other version. Hopefully it won't boot both of you, or do anything at all. How you doing, Simon?
I'm good. Yourself?
Excellent. Yeah, we're all right. We're homebound and getting on with lots of fun hobbying stuff. That's one of the silver clouds of this whole thing, isn't it? Has anybody managed to actually get any painting done?
I have. I'm not gonna lie, but I have got some paint.
Well, sounds like you're doing better than me. I'm afraid I've done nothing in the hobbying. We've done a bit of board gaming. We've managed to keep ourselves entertained perfectly well. But as far as actual sort of sitting down and getting the backlog done, I'm afraid I've done nothing, and I'm thoroughly ashamed of myself.
Yeah, it's been pretty much the same. I think I mentioned it at the last cat, so we'll see what happens. We have here Senior Blue Wing.
Ooh, okay. So
a little bit. So we'll see how much if I can get them finished within this hour.
Oh, cool. Okay, that's a great idea. Yeah, I sort of feel like I'd like to do that, but I know then my mind will just be on what I'm doing and not on actually sort of, talking about the things that we need to talk about. We've got an agenda. Yeah, painting. I remember when we ran the Kickstarter, my friend John did some live painting, and we were filming him. He's an extremely good painter, and he did Nyx and Venk, Kaneda. Who else did he do? He did Miria and also Sage. And one of them he did, I think it was Sage, he was doing live on stream. And after,
yeah, I remember that. I never got a chance to check those out.
Yeah, no, he did. He did a fantastic job on them. They're still, they're still some of my favorites just because of the kind of nostalgia thing as much as anything else. But also, John is a really exceptional painter, and he really did a fantastic job with them. But after the stream, he turned around and said, like, I think I need to go to bed. I'm mentally exhausted with concentrating on the painting, but also talking and keeping the conversation going at the same time. That kind of multitask. So good luck, Sean. Your challenge starts now, right?
Yeah, we'll see how it goes.
So have you been keeping yourself occupied as far if you haven't been doing much painting?
Let's see. A lot of it has been setting the house up. So I normally work during the summer times at a theater in Wisconsin. I was coming up early for beginning of April to do some work around the theater, unpacking. We got a new building last year in the fall. Of course, all of this hit, and that slowed it all down.
Yep.
And with all of that, I'm also trying to move into the girlfriend's house up in Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. So I have a lot of unpacking and everything of that to do up here. So it's been more settling.
Yep, but worth doing, I guess. It's good you're sort of out in the countryside a little bit, right?
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of great nature. We're in a condo, which is like a private owned apartment complex right on the lake.
Yeah.
So that's great. Just haven't done as much hobby stuff myself.
Yeah. Well, got to keep busy somehow, and I've definitely found, we've both been working from home. For me, it's no great change. The only difference is I occasionally get a change of scenery in the afternoons. I'll go to the pub and work in the pub where there's Wi-Fi and drinking Diet Coke. I'd like to say I've tried doing design work on beer, and it works great for about 15 minutes, and then goes downhill from there. Which, funnily enough, is exactly like my pool playing. When I drink, but yeah, for me, there's no great change. But after the work day, Sarah and I are sort of, we're trying to find ways to break up the day and separate the work from the recreation time, and so. Unfortunately, there's been a certain amount of this as a way to break up the time, which is possibly not ideal. But we've been getting a few board games in, and just obviously the usual Netflix and what have you. But it doesn't leave a great deal of hobbying time, because I work during the day, and so was socializing during the evening. Feel all even more than normally, like you need that kind of unwinding together time. Yeah, it's been interesting. So how about you, Simon?
Yeah, it's a real part of adjusting to what is the new normal, which is changing on a daily basis at the moment. A lot of work, a lot of business, with the day job, unfortunately. But no, getting a fair bit of painting done in the evenings, because a lot of the other commitments that I would normally have aren't so required at the moment.
Yeah, and you work from home normally, don't you, or at least for some time?
Yeah. At the home or on the road, so there's a lot more at home than on the road now. So.
Yeah. Well, I guess one of the interesting things now is your gaming time is very different and limited, unless you've got a sort of gaming partner, or kids old enough to game with, or something like that. I know a few of my friends in that situation, but of course we're all turning more and more to some kind of online gaming, and I don't mean video games. I mean finding ways to play board games, miniatures games, card games, and things like that online. So have any of you been doing any of that sort of thing?
I mean, I've got a group of friends that we're just about to start up. Don't swear at me, but we're about to start a Blood Bowl league online using the Blood Bowl video game. So
yeah. So I remember the Blood Bowl 2, I think, was the good one, right?
They released the right one.
Yeah. It was a bit sketchy. But there's an old thing called was it called Fumble?
Yeah.
Which where you could play, years ago, before that video game came out. And of course, it's pretty analog looking. It kind of looks like a 1990s video game. At best.
Did the job for us all there.
But yeah, exactly. It did the job, and if what you're interested in is the game itself and not the sort of visual side of things, then that works really well. So yeah, that's a good one. We last year played a Blood Bowl league a little while ago. Unfortunately, I made the great mistake of forcing my other half to play some of The Witcher. She was highly skeptical because she didn't want to be Geralt, and she likes a video RPG, but she wants to design her character and what have you. And I'm like, all right, well, look, play it for 2 hours. And if after that 2 hours you don't want to play it anymore, don't play it, but just give it a go. And I haven't been able to peel her off the PlayStation for about a month, more than a month, I think.
No.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, she's blitzed through the main game, but she's also one of those video gamers. She's got to do every single side quest going. And sort of really taking the making the most of the content. But I have to say, as for video games as they go, I was totally over the big open world RPG genre in general. I'd played too many of them. They just started to feel really samey to me. And that one, really, I think the quality of writing is what separated it for me. Have either of you played it?
Yeah, it's an immersive game. It's the closest I've seen that's come to Skyrim.
Mm.
I haven't had a chance to give that one a try. I'm not sure if I can. I have a PlayStation 3. That's it.
Yeah, no, it's on the PlayStation 4, I think. But I think it recently got ported. No, I'm thinking of another game. It's available on PC anyway. But Sarah was, the reason why I made her play it is because her favorite game of all time was Skyrim. And she told me, and I'm like, well, this is really, it's like Skyrim, but with a much better story and much more engaging writing. And I think it's not, it's pretty obvious when you play it that they've taken a lot of the storylines from actual, an actual book and an actual writer who, I've never actually read the books. I started to read one of them, and what I thought was the first book, and was a bit baffled because it's short stories. And I didn't really get into it. I found there was an awful lot of, rather than describing action, there was an awful lot of conversation about action which had happened in the past. I didn't really get on with it, and I found out later that I really did get the first book. I didn't make a mistake, which was my initial assumption, but it's just that there are a few books of short stories that you've got to read before you get to the actual main books. But that's a bit of a digression, but in general I think it really shows that these stories have been written by a genuine writer of literature, and not just sort of video game writer.
I couldn't agree more.
Looks like we've lost Sean. I noticed his lighting was changing a lot. But the long and the short of that is that if I want to do anything on the PlayStation, I've got to ask very nicely, and so I haven't been doing a lot of video gaming at all. But I've been playing a little bit of, so Sean and I are together. The latest Arkham Horror, the card game cycle is, you can play it as an 8-part campaign, but really it's 2 different parts. It's called the Dream Eaters, and one group of adventurers are in the dreamland and the others are in the real world. And you kind of pass notes and exchange information as you go through it together. So Sean's played the first scenario in his campaign. I now played the first in mine. Both of us playing solo, but not what I think they call true solo, where you make a solo deck. We've both been piloting 2 investigators at the same time.
I'm running 2. I've got Tommy, a deck that I built for a blob that eats everything.
Yeah.
And a deck that I altered from a net deck for Ashcan Pete. I figured it kind of worked for this campaign.
Yeah.
So you guys playing it digitally, or are you literally getting your cards out on the table yourselves and just messaging each other?
Yeah, no. So basically, the way it works is that you play 2 separate campaigns concurrently. So you're not playing in each other's games. So basically, I go away and play the scenario 1A, and Sean plays scenario 1B, and their 2A and B are 2 separate campaigns that are somehow, and I'm not entirely clear on how yet, but all will be revealed as we progress. But those 2 campaigns are run concurrently, and you kind of exchange information, but not during the game, in the kind of after game process.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Once we're done with this call, I should pull out those instructions so we can read through the cat interlude.
Yeah, so I've read my cat interlude, and it hasn't told me to tell you anything yet. So I assume maybe the information is traveling in the other direction in this first one.
Okay, yeah, we'll check it out.
I know, Simon, you're a big fan of the game.
Huge fan.
Have you ever played it solo?
No, I've never played it solo. I've always played it in at least a group of 2. I've done the entirety of the original set of scenarios. In a group of 4, and we've done Damage Legacy in a group of 4 as well. Yeah,
so there's like the mini campaign that comes in the core box. Yeah, that's right. Then there's the Dunwich Legacy is the second one, and then I did that with Sarah, and then with another friend of mine we skipped forward to the I forgot what it's called, the Lost Expedition or something like
Lost
that.
World, yeah,
Lost World.
It's something like that.
I think it's called the
World.
Lost Expedition,
World.
but Forgotten World. Yeah, that's right.
That's the one.
That's right.
Yeah, because you've got the path to Carcosa between those two.
Yeah, that's right. And that I
the
haven't played, and I've been like a lot of people. I've been sitting bored, you know, in quarantine, ogling new cards, and thought, well, maybe I'll do that solo. But yeah, you can't get it for love nor money in England. I think in America, a lot of places still have stock, but the Fantasy Flight stock control, they've just got such an enormous product line that things, yeah, I think it's just, you know, I have a little bit of insight in it myself on a much smaller scale. Keeping things in stock is a challenge, and I've only got a product line of like 65 products or something like that, and they're into the, I suppose they're probably into 1,000 or more than 1,000.
At least.
Yeah,
and
so
Arkham Horror itself's got 6 cycles now. Plus you've got all the return twos, and you know, you're looking at 300-400 SKUs just in that game alone.
Yeah. So it's challenging, and I understand. I understand why they can't do it, but yeah, it's frustrating when, you know, you can get all but one pack of a cycle or something like that, and you want to play the whole story. So I don't really want to start it until I've got the whole lot in front of me.
Yeah, there's one from the Dunwich Legacy. I think it's the Miskatonic Museum.
Yeah.
One of the 6, and it's literally rare as rocking horse.
Yeah.
Proverbial.
Yeah.
I was lucky. I've got all of them, but yeah, I don't know anybody that can get hold of that one.
Yeah. Well, it'll come back into print at some stage. You just have to be patient. Has anyone in the chat played it? I can thoroughly recommend it, and I can also, you know, I'll put my hands up and say last week we announced, you know, where we're going. I'll talk a little bit more about the Kickstarter later on, but you know, the new Drowned Earth, or the new game in the Drowned Earth family, Alaia Chronicles, and I don't mind telling you, I'm very proud to announce I borrowed a bunch of ideas from the from Arkham Horror, the card game. So really fantastic, solid design, and a lot of the ways that they choose to handle the campaign aspect, and a lot of ways that they choose to drive those scenarios. It occurred to me they're really suitable for a miniatures game, you know, to do something quite different, but using some of the same mechanics.
I couldn't agree more. I think anybody that thinks that there's not a lot of sharing of ideas, for want of a better word, in any industry nowadays is pretty naive.
Yeah, and I don't
it's hard
think
to come up with something completely new.
I think that some people, another sort of, while we're on the sort of game design topic, another piece of wisdom, I can't remember who it was, it might have been Richard Garfield, but a sort of very, very eminent designer said, you don't want to be too innovative, because actually people are... people are challenged by too much that's different. You know, you've got to get your head around new ideas as much as you can, but often the you know, if a game is too unfamiliar, it's too hard to learn. So you want to take a bunch of commonly accepted ways of doing things, so that people can navigate a landscape that they understand. But the innovation is exactly where it needs to be, and, you know, not just innovation for its own sake. Simon, you with me? Sean seems to sort of come in and out.
Sorry.
Good.
I think there's a lot to be said for there's a lot of smarter people that have come before us, and there's a good chance they probably looked at these things, and if they haven't done it, there's probably a reason. Yeah,
and the old one, although it's a misquote, it's attributed to a lot of different people, Picasso being one of them, but apparently he never said it. It's good artists borrow, great artists steal.
Yes, that's the one.
And the
imitation is the sincerest form of flattery.
yeah, exactly. And I think there's a big difference between plagiarizing and stealing. You know, you steal an idea, you plagiarize an entire game. And so if you literally just make a carbon copy of somebody else's artwork or somebody else's game or somebody else's world or whatever it is, then that's clear plagiarism. But the best thing to do is pick and choose amongst the things that you like. You know, let's be honest, all miniatures games share a common grammar that were laid down a long time ago in the sort of 70s and 80s. There are these common ideas that run through all of them, and there's a reason for that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it.
Can you think of anything that is like a new mechanic that you've seen recently that you're like, oh, that's great?
Recently, that's a good question. I have to say, Simon, go.
I think Kfold is probably the closest to something completely new that I've seen in a number of years.
Well, certainly that kind of keyforged ethos of having a completely unique, every deck is completely unique and procedurally generated, is really interesting. And, you know, I've played a bit of it and it does work. I think there was a lot of hysteria to begin with about people complaining and doubting whether it was going to work or not, or saying that the balance was completely wrong and what have you. But the system does seem to work. And the naysayers, I think, were just using old thinking and presumptions that they brought from other games, and largely I think Magic would be the one there.
Yeah, 100% right. You don't get somebody like Richard Garfield coming up with something that he hasn't got 100% faith in, because he's got too much of a reputation to let go out the window. I
mean, the guy releases one game every 5 years, and every single time it's a smash hit. You know, it's incredible. He's like the Martin Scorsese of films. You know, well, actually, no, like the Tarantino of films. Scorsese makes too many films. It's really impressive. But I've enjoyed Keyforge. I have to say, it hasn't lit my world on fire. And I bought a bunch of decks, and I don't find myself playing it that often. But one of the things that I like about it is because there isn't that deck building aspect. It can sit on the cupboard, and it's a simple enough game and easy enough to remember how to play that you could just roll out a couple of decks. You can not have played it in several months and remember quite easily how to get going. And I have to say
that, and I love it about that game. Actually, I hadn't played for in a year, and in February I went to our local game store for the new set with the Dinosaurians, the Star Trek ripoff faction. A lot of fun stuff, and I bought a deck and played in our seal tournament, basically. Mm-hmm. And the deck was fabulous. And I'm sitting here going, why do I keep winning? I actually won the entire event and got a free mat out of it. A friend, I hadn't played it in a year since that game. So I love that game for that aspect, that I can pick it up and go again.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Maybe now isn't exactly the right time to say this, because we're all kind of stuck indoors and able to repeat play an awful lot. But something that prevents me from getting games off the shelf is I look, like, for example, one of my favorite board games is the Lord of the Rings, War of the Ring. The old 2-player board game, not the Games Workshop like mini scale miniatures game, but the proper sort of board game, which is pretty much Lord of the Rings in a box, and it's an enormous footprint. You need a big table for it. It takes a long time. It can be 5-6 hour game sometimes. And it's a great game, and it's really worth your time, and it's worth that investment of time. It's worth then, within a couple of weeks, putting it back on the table again while it's fresh in your mind, and having another go and trying a different strategy. You basically, it's a board game with a single scenario that you're playing over and over again, but there are so many different ways to do it for both of you, the good and the evil side. But I look at it and I think, I'd really like to play that. And then I think, but it's going to take an hour to set up. It's going to take another hour for me to remember how to play. You know, we're gonna struggle to through the rule book for the first hour of playing, and it's just a huge investment of time and energy and effort. And something like Keyforge doesn't give you as rich an experience, but the fact that you can just kind of reach up and pluck it off the shelf and get going within 15 minutes of opening the deck, or even quicker with something like Keyforge, is just a huge advantage nowadays. There are times where you just don't have the time, you don't have the energy for that really big footprint, amazing, rich experience game.
100%. It's also nice. It's nice to have a game, especially in that, CCG, TCG kind of sphere, where it's not a case of how much money you dropped into buying the best cards in the deck to build a power deck. It's walk in. Another thing, you turn up to a local game store, nothing left to do, and that suddenly they crack on with a Keyforge game, and you can just go and buy one off the deck and bang, you're in.
Yeah, exactly. The cost of your deck is the cost of a buy-in for a sealed tournament in any other game, maybe even a bit less, and get going straight away. And it's going to be a new and fresh experience. And I really, the idea that you can't come with a deck that you already really know how to play, but you have to adapt to the circumstance at the time is a great part of it, I think.
And I love the way they've got of balancing out the decks as well. So if you're playing them in organised play, you start getting chains for them.
So I remember, because I haven't really played it I played it for a little bit when it first came out, and then about 6 months later I had another little burst, but I've got a couple of the blue decks, but I've only really played it in the red deck era. So Blue Taxed in the chat is saying that there's an online version, and I'm glad to hear that, because they were talking about it when it first came out, and what are you going to do with these QR codes and stuff like that, logging into the app and what have you. But it was really feature poor when it first came out, that app, and so I'm glad they've taken it places. In fact, thank you for letting me know, because I'll definitely have a look at that over the next week or so.
What platform is that on? Blue Tax?
It'd be interesting to know.
Jock made a good point. He loves Netrunner. It's a game that I really wanted to get into. I started playing a few bits and absolutely loved the strategic element of it. And then, thankfully I didn't buy into it, because, 2 months after I started dabbling, they pulled the plug on it.
Right. Well, I played it years and years ago, quite a lot. And I think for that kind of, definitely for that sort of dueling 1v1 card game, it's hands down and by a long way the most thematic of those style of games I've ever played. You really get the sense that you are a runner, or a hacker, or a corporation defending your stuff. It really, the world is very rich. It's great. It's a really great game. And I had
another Richard Garfield knock it out the park.
As I say, that's it.
It's a weird one, that one, isn't it? Because they've only lost the rights to the actual game mechanics. They own the imagery and
that's right. They ported it into Android, which is their world. So it was originally just called Netrunner, and then it was Android Netrunner in Fantasy Flight. It's their own proprietary cyberpunk universe, because they've got board games. There's a role play game. They've got an art book and various different board games. New Angeles. There are a bunch. I played a few of them. None of them come close to being as good as Android Netrunner, though. And I think my favorite Netrunner experience, because again, it's one of those Fantasy Flight Designs games that you have to become really obsessed with, and they have to become your main game in order for you to really get the most out of them. It's very difficult to dip in and dip out, I think. And Netrunner definitely.
With Lord of the Rings, same as the Game of Thrones game, even. I know,
and
that's like Netrunner. That's got a massive massive community still,
Yeah.
even though it's not a live game.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
Yeah.
I've got friends that play Game of Thrones, and literally there is a massive tournament where they hire out a German castle each year.
Yeah.
And everybody flies
Yeah.
over to Germany for it.
So the best Netrunner experiences I had was I played through a friend of mine. They did a kind of legacy campaign box where it takes you through a story. I have to say the story wasn't necessarily the strongest part of it, but you played the same deck and your deck evolved a little bit over time. You sort of moved things into it, moved things out of it, both story things, but you also got a little bit like the way Arkham Horror works, in that you can you gain XP and you add new cards and that kind of thing. But it was a really fun, engaging experience. You really got to understand the deck you were playing against. There was some very nice catch up and balancing mechanics where, you know, as you started to win more and more, you got certain disadvantages, and as you lost more, you got to shuffle in to your deck certain advantages, which they might have one use only. It was a really great great experience. I liked it a lot, and it was, for me, the best way to play Netrunner as somebody who was only ever going to be a casual gamer and wasn't going to go down on a weekly basis to my local store and really try to get really great at the game, memorize all of the cards and card text, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's just a really, you know, it's the thematic element of you genuinely feel like you're going up against the corporations, and I really like the asymmetric mentality of, and then you swap after the first game.
Yeah. Yeah, well, while we're on the subject of borrowed mechanics, not so much mechanics, but I've certainly borrowed a few ideas from that Netrunner legacy campaign for Alaia Chronicles and the Kickstarter. I explained a little bit of this last week, but just to anybody who wasn't around last week, the idea is that the Kickstarter is going to be for a new game. It's not the Drowned Earth. It's based on Drowned Earth mechanics. It's very similar. The miniatures will be mutually compatible. A lot of the components will be mutually compatible, and you'll be very familiar with most of the ideas. But it's strayed enough. It originally started off as an expansion for the Drowned Earth, but it's different enough now that I think it justifies its own title. And what we're releasing in the Kickstarter is the first of what I hope will be a number of campaigns set in this game system and this game environment. And you're playing a campaign which is a series of games where you have, it's not a legacy game, but you have certain legacy elements where both your character will change in a kind of RPG way. The choices that you make earlier on in the campaign will affect the campaign later on, and some of those ideas will be borrowing from that Netrunner campaign, because I mean I played it years ago, but I remember it pretty well, and I've still got all the old components. But yeah, you know, it's good stuff, and I wanted generally to talk about what really this whole sort of, you know, quarantine and global pandemic means for the Kickstarter. And I'd love to give a really clear answer, but I'm still kind of monitoring the situation, and I still don't really know. But one problem that we're having, I'm edging towards the idea of just launching it during this whole thing and not worrying too much about it. You know, it's a solo and cooperative game. I think, you know, it's sort of, if there's a time where people will be reminded that they like games like that, then now is it. But one of the problems is that, of course, everything, or not everything, but a lot of things are still running. So we're still manufacturing, the website's still open for business, we're still able at a slightly reduced rate to get things out to people. Basically, it's just me, and I limit my leaving the house. So I go to the post office with, you know, a big rucksack and some carrier bags of stuff once a week, whereas previously parcels would be posted out within a few days of orders being taken. But one problem that I'm having is that, you know, for the Kickstarter, we really need some physical prototypes, and I need to send them out. I wanted to send some physical prototypes out to reviewers. We need them to make a video. We need them to you know, to take product photography and that sort of thing. And that's proving quite difficult to get on a good time scale. So I feel like we might have to delay purely for practical reasons rather than just because now isn't necessarily the best time to run a Kickstarter.
Yeah, it's understandable. It's a weird time. Everybody's life is changing by the minute, both health, financial, etc. But I would be looking forward to it if it drops.
Well, there's also another thing that somebody pointed out to me a while ago. They're like, well, people could just do the £1 pledge level, and you know, get in if you're running a kind of a pledge manager afterwards, which we certainly would be. Then they can just catch up. Then the problem then, of course, is that you don't get so many stretch goals unlocked. Because you know,
with their recent dungeon crawler, I don't know if you saw it. Was it League of Infamy?
I didn't.
And yeah, it's kind of a weird dungeon crawl. It's really good. So you're working together, but you're also looking to stab each other in the back.
Yeah.
And you know, Ronnie, the guy who owns Mantic, they were doing really well. You know, opened up a load of stretch goals. And literally in the space of 48 hours, they lost like 60% of their backers. No,
yeah.
I think it was just everybody pulled out because they didn't have money at the end of the lead up to Christmas.
Yeah.
So the way they dealt with it is that they said everybody who dropped down to the £1 pledge, all of the funds that were brought in through the pledge manager would still go towards unlocking those stretch goals.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, it's really difficult to do, though. I mean, I understand if you're a kind of multi-employee business, then you can just make that somebody's 2-day job. But I can't do that. You know, like my time is too precious. They're already, you know, as you know, obviously I get a lot of help from you guys with play testing and with organizing the Wayfarers program, and you know, organizing some of the online and offline events that we run and stuff like that. But as my day-to-day workload is already completely filled with, you know, just like getting the logistics organized of keeping stuff in stock, of new product development, handling the artists and something like that. My girlfriend, I might have said this last week actually, but my girlfriend, she was, you know, when we're sitting on basically on, she's got my desk and I've got the some fold-out tables that we take to fairs, and she said, like, we've been basically isolated in the house together working for 2 weeks, and I haven't seen you. You know, you work 8-9 hour days every day, and I haven't seen you do a single piece of game design. I'm like, yeah, I never have time for that. I'd love to. Everybody's like, what do you do? Well, I'm a game designer. They're like, well, that sounds exciting. It's like, I should stop saying that. What I should really say is that I am a game publisher, because that's how it feels a lot of the time. The really fun, necessary, essential design work, unfortunately, all too often it plays second fiddle to just the logistics of running a business, a manufacturer and a mail order company, you know, and product development at the same time.
It's a weird double-edged sword, isn't it? You can't do one without the other, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, I think you know, I've got confidence in the Alaia Chronicles. The first chapter, I will say it now, it's a working title, but I'm pretty sure we're going to stick with it. It's Alaia Chronicles Raptor Claw Island. So there's various stuff that's going to happen on this island. Basically, the players are going to wake up washed up on a beach, shipwrecked on this island, and they're going to go off exploring a little bit, and they're going to find various things, which I'm not going to go into too much detail on. I don't want to spoil the story, but you know, they'll have a great adventure, basically trying to find a way off this island, having been shipwrecked, and it's set in the Thousand Isles. And does anybody know what the Thousand Isles are famous for?
Reuben sandwiches.
No, good guess, but definitely not. Simon, any ideas? Anyone in chat?
I'm hand it over to you on that one. Anybody in the chat?
Well, actually, if I say anyone in the chat, we'll have to wait like 3 minutes before.
That's very true. That's very true.
Okay.
Blue chicken.
Dominic says
That's
blue
the
chickens.
blue
Yeah. No, and Dominic, of all people, should know that the Thousand Islands are famous for pirates. So we might be having some pirate stroke dino action going on in this campaign. But
don't make promises, James. Don't make promises.
Yeah.
You've
Well,
been after
no.
the pirates for so long.
Well, that's been locked down. So something that did occur to me is if I do end up postponing the Kickstarter, and if I do that, it'll only be because I think it's best for the game in the long run. But if I do, I will consider just releasing the pirates as a faction outside the Kickstarter. So if that's what you've been waiting for, then you might not have to wait too long. But that is going to be a fifth faction, and I think now I'm quite happy. I've been working enough on the idea. I'm happy to say that what we're going to do, there's been a problem for anybody who is a fan of the Wayfarers. You'll notice the Wayfarers have had less releases than everyone, and the reason for that is quite simple. It's because while every time we release a Wayfarer model, we basically dilute the uniqueness of all of the other factions. So if you make the Wayfarers too good, then people just like they become an auto take because everyone has access to them. And if you don't make them good enough, then the Wayfarers as a faction in their own right lags behind, and that's problematic. So trying to ensure that you have regular fair releases for anybody who's a Wayfarer player, while not diluting the model pool in general and the sort of identity of the different factions is a bit challenging. So what we're going to do is we're basically going to fuse the pirate faction, who I won't announce the name yet, but the pirate faction and the Wayfarers are basically going to be sister factions. They're going to be closely aligned and related, and we'll soon, when they're released or during the Kickstarter, we're going to release some fluff that explains why this is the case, why it was. There are some clues in the Wayfarer fluff anyway. So this was always something that was potentially on the cards if we could make it work. But the general idea is that Wayfarers will still be mercenaries for all other factions, and they will still be takeable as their own faction. Any pirate model can work with the Wayfarer faction. So any pirates which we release in the future will you'll be able to take them without restriction if you have a Wayfarer leader. And similarly, any Wayfarers without restriction can go into the pirate faction. So basically, they function almost as a single faction, but the pirates are not mercenaries and cannot be taken by other factions. Does that make sense?
Yes, to me it does, and it sounds super cool. It'll just be firm against the pirates, personally, in my game.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I think the other advantage is that you'll have the Wayfarer stroke pirate, alliance will have an awful lot more. They'll have some pretty decent leader options because they're gonna have a double whammy as far as leader choices are concerned. But what that means is that in the future we're going to continue to release not very many Wayfarer models. We will continue to release them. This isn't, we're not doing pirates instead of Wayfarers, but it just gives me a way to ensure that anybody who is a dedicated Wayfarer player is going to get a bunch of new releases that are interesting to them. So and that
I can't wait for it. I know we discussed it a little while ago how this might work, and genuinely can't wait for it.
And I think some of the gameplay options that we've been looking at are pretty exciting for it as well. So I hope people will respond well to it. I hope that they like it. I think it's going to be super cool. It solves a lot of problems and allows us to do some interesting stuff at the same time.
Very cool, very cool. I did see a question in the chat, curious about what you're thinking about for Kickstarter pledge levels, prices of the new Raptor Claw Island?
Okay, so I'm going to have to be very vague because it depends on quite a number of different things. And in these times of financial insecurity, exchange rates might fluctuate quite a lot as well. But what I'm hoping is that all right, I'm gonna say it. Not going to talk too closely about money, but the starting pledge level I'm going to try and make as inexpensive as possible. So considerably less than you would expect to buy a big box expansion of miniatures from another miniatures company. So I'm hoping somewhere that the core box. So before I say a rough figure, let me manage some expectations. The core box, and it will be a boxed product, will contain everything that you need to play. It will be a single purchase, everything you need to play product. But the caveat to that is that it will contain standees, which you have the choice of upgrading to miniatures if you want. And so the core box itself will be quite a low price point. As low as we can get it, considering there's going to be like 200 cards and some scenery and a bunch of player boards and standees and dice and that sort of thing. So the scenarios are very card driven, and it's a very kind of narrative experience. And so what I'm hoping for is that the core box itself will cost roughly the same as a starter box for a campaign. So, starter box being 5 miniatures. But, I'll say it again, it's all cards, counters. We're going to have several fold out board maps, some flat scenery, beautifully designed flat scenery by this same guy who did Imperial Assault and a lot of other titles for both Cool Mini or Not and Fantasy Flight. I've got a really fantastic artist called Henning Ludvigsen doing the tiles. But no miniatures. And what that means is that if you want to go a higher pledge level, you'll have miniatures involved in that pledge level. It also means that if you've got a bunch of models at home, you've got a bunch of dinos already, you don't need to buy the dinos for the campaign box if you don't want to. So again, that was a real wrestle. I'm like, can I sell? I make miniatures games. Can I sell a box that doesn't have any miniatures in it? And I thought, no, that's the absolute best thing to do, because it means that people can pick and choose what they want to buy. Make the actual game itself this low price point. You can get involved, play the game, see how much you like it. If you've already got models, you don't have to buy an expensive box full of things that you've got already. You can add to your collection as you see fit. And if you just want to carry on playing with standees, you're not a miniatures gamer, you don't like painting, and you just want the campaign experience, you can do that as well.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely the right decision, because those of us that have been playing for a while have probably got a fair number of dinosaurs sitting on our shelves or in our miniature boxes. Not that there's ever too many dinosaurs in this world,
No,
but we've probably got a fair few. So being given the purchase what's necessary is a great idea.
Yeah, and what I'm hoping is that there are going to be some more dino types in the campaign that we will unlock, but also what we're going to try and do, what I'm thinking about at the moment, is selling alpha profiles. And an alpha pack will basically be 1 miniature, a deck of cards, the AI cards for the game, and profile cards for the alpha profile for Drowned Earth and the AI profile for Alaia Chronicles. And so you can buy the core box, but if you want to play the campaign with different dino types than the ones which are in the core box, you just buy this alpha dino pack. And what I'm really, we haven't done enough work on it yet, but I'm fairly sure we're going to be able to make it work. The Alaia Chronicles box will come with rules to use the AI dinos in Drowned Earth as well.
That'll be fun to be able to have wild dinos roaming around between the two teams, and a fun way to interact with them. Yeah.
Well, I can definitely see a lot of opportunity to make some really cool and exciting scenarios based on that. The idea
of dinosaur red cant, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. You know, where they're they're defending, and ways to. I'm thinking of interesting ways to like weaponize the dinosaurs. If they react to noise, then lobbing a grenade behind your opponent, like right over their heads, so that it explodes and the dinos run towards your opponent instead of you. All kind, setting decoys, using a cheat model to to go on a dodgy suicide mission, so that they run towards your opponent, and they get shot down easily, but then this enormous horde of dinos come at you afterwards. There are all kinds of interesting and fun things which I think the regular Drowned Earth rules will benefit from. And so basically what we're looking at is the Alaia Chronicles will be a self-contained game which will package with an AI expansion for the Drowned Earth as well.
There's a lot of positivity coming into the chat about it as well.
Well, I'm glad. I have to say, one thing that I was really nervous of, because I scratched my head and really wrestled with it, was the idea of just having the core box with standees only. And it makes a lot of sense. And the more that I've thought about it, the more the idea has grown on me. But I realized that for a lot of people, the instant reaction would be, whoa, no miniatures?
It's no different to what Infinity have done in the past, things like Campaign Paradiso. So it's a new way of playing a game. You can still use your existing options, but there will be a stuff that you can do it as you want to go along.
Well, I guess if you're willing to buy a book that doesn't have miniatures, and the book is a campaign expansion for your existing game, then why would this be any different? And I just think it's a way of making sure that we'll have a number of different pledge levels for the campaign, where people will be able to just come in at the basic level if that's what they want to do, that's what they can afford. If they want to start off slow and build up their collection over time, and for people who want a little bit more, there'll be a medium pledge level with a bunch of extra stuff, and then there'll be all singing, all dancing deluxe pledge level for people who are just like screw it, I want everything. It just seems, particularly in a Kickstarter environment, it just seems like a really sensible way to handle it.
Yeah, completely agree. Plus, we've got some really cool models coming.
Yeah. Well, there is also that. So those some of them are going to have to be stretch goals, I think. We'll start the campaign with some things which are ready to go, but there are other things which I'll need to see. The campaign will need to do well in order for us to be able to afford to make them available. And in particular, I'm talking about those AI profiles and new AI sculpts. To engineer those, we'll need some budget to be able to do that, of course. But I think they'll come eventually. But whether they come right now or like in a year's time will just depend on how well the Kickstarter does. And if we can afford to fund their production, then we will 100% do that. Because for me, I want as many like AI profiles for Drowned Earth, as well as being able to run through the campaign a second time with a different set of dino substitutions. Yeah, there's a lot going for it, a lot of different ideas we can put in.
Definitely, and you've designed it in a way that it's got great, both replayability and a long future. We've just been able to bring out new, places to explore. Alaia is such a rich tapestry of a creative world that there's loads of stuff that can
Well, yeah, this time we're talking about, pirates and islands, and next time, we can go to a different environment, a different part of the world, do a bit more lore building, a little bit more world building, exploring different parts of the continent. Yeah, it should.
Blackwater Bay or whatever it is, the Diverg,
Yeah,
the big huge Diverg mining plant.
yeah,
That's
that's right. Their big oil rig in the middle of Blackwater Bay. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. There are lots of
So much
places
of
to
that map that
explore.
we haven't even touched on.
Yeah. So I think we said we were going to do some questions. So I know Sean's prepared a little presentation because of course we've had some fantastic activity in the Facebook group while people are stuck at home. Unsurprisingly, as useless as I've been and Sean's been by the sound of it, but Simon's been doing a little bit better. People, in the Facebook community have been posting in their droves. So we've had some. We'll do some while we're on the Kickstarter subject. We'll finish off with some Q&A, and then we'll wind up this hangout with Sean presenting us with some of the great work that's been done on Kickstarter lately.
Perfect.
So who was it? Yeah, was it Simon? You've got the.
Yeah, we've got a couple of questions in the Discord chat. So one of the questions: will there be MPC models that can be used in missions like hazardous planting from the planter season, or base camp from the last winter campaign, or any other self-brewed scenario that includes MPCs, especially if they are non-combatant models or townies or tribesfolk?
So I think at the moment, the answer to that is probably no. And I'll explain why. A Kickstarter is an ideal place to start doing things like that. And I really like non-combatant models are something that I really like. Unfortunately, from a commercial point of view, the market is for models that you can use in your games to make you win, sadly. And so generally the reason why you'd think everybody wants non-combatant models, everybody talks about it, and not everyone, but a lot of people do. You hear it quite commonly asked for and commonly said, and I love them, and whoever's asked the question obviously does as well, and we're not alone. There are lots of people that do. And why aren't there more than there are? And the answer why is because they don't sell very well, unfortunately. However, when you do, when you're in a Kickstarter format, you have the opportunity to, particularly when you're making a campaign style game, to add those really cool sort of story set pieces. And so at the moment, I just don't know what the demand for that kind of thing is going to be like. I don't know what the budget we're going to have is going to be like for the Kickstarter. It depends on how well it does. And so most of the stretch goals that I've been preparing, I have to make some kind of financial investment either in concept art or possibly in concept art and sculpting as well. And so I just don't feel confident enough in my ability to do that kind of stuff right now. Maybe halfway through the Kickstarter campaign, if we're doing really well, I might say, hang on, let's do something like that. Another option is just that, later down, if the first Kickstarter does well, then I'll know we'll be able to do things like that into the future and design around them and design scenarios that use those kinds of things. I mean, I'm sort of seeing like, imagine a merchant with like a dwarf triceratops behind him that's got loads of like packs and bundles of goods, that kind of thing, stegosaurus driven chariot, I mean like a trading cart caravan style thing. There's loads of really, really cool stuff you can do that I think they'd make great models. I'd really like to make them. I need to know that they're going to be commercially sensible, because when you're a small company, your resources are limited, and you have to be really careful with how you allocate them.
It makes complete sense. Pete from London asked, will there ever be multiple models on one base, like a gaggle of tiny dinosaurs on a 50mm base?
Well, I don't have any plans to do that at the moment, but it's a good idea. So I think that's the way I'd answer that question. I like the idea. I haven't got any immediate plans to do it, but I'll mull it over. It's a good suggestion.
And he followed up with a very important question of, is there pizza in your Alaia? And if so, which dinosaur makes the best topping?
Well, I'm allergic to cheese, and so nobody in Alaia makes cheese. It's gross.
I completely agree. I'm on the same bandwagon as you are.
Well, so actually, from a practical point of view, there aren't really any domesticated mammals in Alaia. All of those sort of large farmyard domesticated animals died out because there was no one to feed them, for hundreds of years. And so the domestication that's gone on has been redomesticating dinosaur and even some insect and large reptilian and dinosaur animals. And to my knowledge, reptiles and birds and dinosaurs do not lactate, so no cheese.
It's a solid answer, and I'm not going to argue with it being in the same boat as you are. I know another question we've had a few times is there any plan in the future for creating custom characters, for want of a better word, where you can develop your own, normal Joe and build them up over the course of the campaign?
Yeah. So the characters in Raptor Claw Island are going to be unnamed characters, and you will be able to, level them up and build them in particular ways. Probably the way that's going to happen is going to be quite limited to begin with, and it might be something that we expand more on in the second campaign. So I'm feeling like at the moment, every one of the hero models is going to have a set race and class combination. So the Barangi is going to be the tank, for example. And there won't at the moment be an opportunity to make a different model, the tank. However, the way you build that tank, there will be a number of different trees and a number of different routes. Originally, I was looking at making it much more expansive, and I realized I just didn't really have the resources to do it properly and to do it well. And so what I'm thinking is that perhaps the characters which are in Raptor Claw Island can be used in the next campaign, and vice versa. The characters that we introduce in the next campaign can be imported into Raptor Claw Island. So when we've had a number of Alaia Chronicles releases, there'll be a bunch of replayability because you'll be able to swap the character hero groups and play with different combinations of characters. And something else is that hopefully once we've got the system designed and it's working well and purring and adding a few bits to it every time we do a new chronicle, we might then be able to expand on the character development process a little bit more and make it more detailed and more customizable than it is at current.
Perfect. I mean, that's the extent of the questions that I've had beforehand. I don't know if there's any questions that guys in the channel will drop in after we've said this, but I mean,
cool. Well, look, while people in the chat are typing, and it takes a few seconds for them to get this, I'll also say that the characters in Alaia Chronicles are going to have a second purpose in the Drowned Earth, and I think what we're looking at the moment, and this is no promises, but what we're looking at the moment is making them unnamed characters in the main Drowned Earth game. So you'll be able to buy a generic tank profile. You'll be able to buy a generic sniper profile for whichever faction you are you're using in the main Drowned Earth game, and you'll buy this pack of hero models for Alaia Chronicles, and that will double as unnamed characters for Drowned Earth. You'll be able to build them in particular ways and use particular profiles. One thing that I'm struggling with a little bit in terms of logistics is that if I want unlimited combinations of you know, how you're going to be able to build those characters, then I need to supply quite a lot of different profile cards. And I think from a balance point of view, from a kind of competitive play point of view, we can't just create a robust system that lets people, you know, gives people a blank card and a point system, and they just fill it in whichever way it likes, whichever way they like. Unfortunately, game balance just doesn't quite work like that. You know, you can use that initial, I've got a basic calculator of, you know, this is what the stats are worth, this is what the skills are worth, and you combine them together and it gives you a rough figure. But you know, from a playtesting point of view, that gives you the start figure, and then you up or downgrade that because you realize that the in-world, in-game situations in which that model is more or less useful change hugely depending on circumstance. And so costing different model profiles is very definitely an art and not a science.
100%. You just got to look at the amount of back and forth we went through during the first Kickstarter playtest on profiles, with minor little tweaks here and there that had massive in-game effects.
Yeah, that's it. It's tinkering, an awful lot of tinkering, moving them up, changing a skill for a different skill, changing a stat, then changing the points again, then suddenly realizing that in this particular circumstance, they can do something really useful. And maybe it's, you know, you should cost them, you know, what they should cost according to what they can do best, not what most people, until they work that out, will think that the model's overcosted. And then suddenly there'll be a revelation of, oh, actually, do you know what? And I saw that happen in the community. For quite a long time, people did not really use ambush properly, and didn't see the potential of it as a skill, and possibly wondered why the models that had ambush were, you know, their stats weren't great, or they were a little bit overcosted compared to other models that don't have that skill. And then suddenly it dawned on people, oh my God, that is what you do with that skill. And you can really, you know, protect a flank, or really, you know, in an opportune moment, kill an expensive model, or make an expensive model game useless. Yeah, it was
completely killed somebody with Aranax out of left field that you really appreciate it.
Yeah, exactly. And there's also just the thing of tying a model up and then, you know, just sending out something fairly beefy like Hosk, to shoot out and tie up a model and then thump it with Canada mounted. So, you know, doubling up on a Keratosaur, or doubling up on Forek mounted or something like that, you know, just rather than going straight in with a relatively even battle, taking it out, pulling off an action point, and then going in with a stronger model to take advantage.
Yeah, 100%. In such a scenario-driven game, there's a lot to be said for being able to slow down one of their models for 1 or 2 turns.
Yeah, and so the little dinos with ambush just make really great roadblocks and really allow you to control the tempo of the game.
Definitely. Well, we haven't had any other questions, so yeah.
No, so I think that means we are over to Sean. Sean, are you ready to show us some Facebook painting bling?
Let's see how this goes. I would like to recommend to everybody that I am not a professional. I just play one on TV. So let's see if this works.
So you're basically screen sharing. Here we go. We're kicking.
Hey, how'd that work? Can you see my...
Yeah. We've got it.
Brilliant. Let us even open this up a little bit more. All right. So if you feel like following along, I am just doing a curated wander through the photos section of the Facebook page. popping up some things I've seen in the last few weeks that I love. This is Galen from Brandon. Brandon has put out a lot of stuff, which I
Yeah, recently he's really been on it. Yeah, I noticed.
beautiful. One of the things I like about it is that it's very fine art, artistic.
Mm.
It looks like kind of a painting. You can see the stroke, and so it looks maybe rough for the classic look, but I think from afar it's really going to pop. And he's got a few other ones that really stand out like that.
Really kind of got that comic book kind of feel to it.
Greg from Chicago, his Ando.
Yeah.
And there's something very, very pastel, very natural.
Yeah, a lot of muted tones. I wonder if he's using contrast paints. Yeah, it's got that feel to it, but it's a really lovely sort of unified color scheme there.
I know something I was planning on trying during all of this quarantine was the God tier models.
Yeah.
Priming them, and then just using watercolors and inks to try and get like a washes and inks to get like a kind of a muted watercolor effect. Oh, I kind of like this for something a little different. From Sean
that's Sean Ashby, isn't it? So from the Chilling Wargamers, who you'll notice we haven't got a guest tonight, but I'm going to ask Sean if he wants to come on another week, as we're doing these every Tuesday. But I don't think I've seen a blue Fancania yet.
No, yeah, I think that's what popped out to me was the armor color, the white, the basic white monkey. It's very cool.
Yeah, it's good.
Alternative color schemes on certain things.
Yeah, I really like it. I sort of feel like since I dictated what all these color schemes should be, I at least have to stick to them. But I'm quite often dying to break out.
Okay, here's another one which is just next level from Random. That's my brain. Not fun, Kanye. My brain disappeared. Rennell.
It's Rennell. Yeah.
And
the fur is lovely there, isn't it? The nice, he's got a nice sort of blend from the almost like she's been out in the sun a lot, and the sort of where the sun's been hitting her shoulders, her hair's been bleached a little bit.
Yeah,
freehand on the vest is outstanding.
More, I don't have enough contrast in my models for myself, but I love that he free-handed the text on the shirt.
Yeah, it's lovely. I can't see what it's. Does it say pinks?
Let's see what's other good ones. That's some more random.
It's been really lovely to see how much activity there's been in the hobbying side of things. It puts me to shame not having really got a paintbrush out.
Yeah. Well, looks like it's
been nice to see a lot more stuff coming from your side of the pond as well, Sean.
Yeah, there's been a lot of, and of course, we'll chat with him very, very soon. When you go away from models and into terrain, just Willie McClelland and all the stuff he gets putting up there.
Well, I have some good news on that front. He is going to be doing a jungle terrain tutorial on the Paint All the Minis online convention over the Easter weekend. So we're going to be running a lot of different stuff. We're even looking at a tabletop simulator module. So we'll actually be able to run demos for people. But we're going to try and do as much stuff as we possibly can. We're even looking at a little one-page RPG system, running a couple of different things. So we were talking a bit about the convention last week, but I really recommend if people just Google Paint All the Minis. I'd love to see a bunch of people come along to that, and we're going to run a number of different events and online games and opportunities to be entertained over that weekend. William was very excited about the idea of doing some tutorials on video. Sounds great to me.
Yeah, is there anything any other cool stuff we're doing that we can announce?
Well, I'm a bit cagey about what we can announce, purely because we're it's all work in progress at the moment, and it's also completely, like we said last week, it's virgin territory, really. I've not been aware of too many, if any, online conventions, but now is the perfect time for us all to get better at online gaming and online communication, and trying to work out what we can offer and what we can do. So we're working on a number of plans. As I say, if we can set up a few rooms and let people play Drowned Earth on Tabletop Simulator, that would be awesome. And yeah, we're going to do some RPG sessions, maybe a paint along session as well, some Q&A stuff. I'll obviously be talking to Dan. We'll be doing a 90-minute episode where we just sort of hang out with the community and talk about the game, talk about life, talk about gaming, a bit like what we're doing here, but with obviously a different focus, and more of a focus on the kind of online convention idea. And I'm really grateful to Dan. I think it's a great idea that he's come up with, and I hope it does well. And I have a feeling if it goes well, and I think it probably will, I think it's something that people are going to do after this whole pandemic thing settles down, because it's just a good idea. There are a lot of people out there who can't make it to conventions due to their geographic location, due to some form of disability or lack of mobility, and so it strikes me as a great thing to experiment with. But yeah, I'm being a bit cagey just because I want to make sure we can really do the things that I say we're going to do before I announce them.
Yeah, totally understood.
And also, I think if anyone's in the chat, post a comment after this or write in the chat if you've got any ideas of things that that we could be doing in an online convention, then I'd really love to hear them. Obviously we're doing Drowned Earth related stuff mainly. Obviously, there are people at the convention who'll be playing other games and just like board and card games and things like that, and that sounds great. But from my perspective, obviously we're there under the official banner, and so we can't really hoodwink filch other people's intellectual property and use other people's games to entertain in a format like that under the official banner. But I'm sure plenty of stuff will go on. But yeah, as I say, if anybody's got any bright ideas about other stuff that we can do, I'd be excited to hear them.
Yeah, drop them in the Discord, guys. We've got got a great community building on there. I think one of the other things I was going to mention to you, Jonas, maybe we can, as we're doing this regularly during the project lockdown over the next few weeks and possibly months, we'll create a side channel on the Discord server just for any questions you guys want us to answer on these streams each week.
Yeah, that's a great idea, because I'd be happy to do a little Q&A session on a weekly basis. And it seems sensible. That reminds me, actually, something that we spoke about last week, which I will make a quick announcement, just an announcement about an announcement. But before the end of the week, the new version of the rulebook will be online to be downloadable, and the new update on the cards as well. And as I've said before, there have been two. One rule change and one name change of a skill. So everybody was getting rend and pierce confused, and it's sensible because rend sounds more like pierce than pierce does, and the other way around. And just to give you a bit of background in the development process, they were originally called pierce and armor pierce, and somebody pointed out that armor pierce was also AP, and we've already got action points. So think of a new name for it. And rather than renaming both, I just thought of a suitable name and renamed the other, and it was a bit of a mistake. I really should have scrap them both pierce and armor pierce, and started again. So what we are doing is we're renaming rend to sunder, because it sounds a bit more like ripping armor apart rather than rend, which sounds a bit like tearing flesh. So hopefully that will be clearer for people. And the other big thing, which we've spoken about before, but and anybody who's bought one of the rule books recently has the new edition of the rule book. It's taken me a little bit of time to get the free PDF formatted in order to reflect the same change. But doubles are no longer feats. So a double higher than your attribute is still a blunder, but a double under an attribute is just a nail it, not a feat. And the reason for that, we've allowed for what we've called a narrative mode for people who really like that, and they like that randomness and craziness in the game. They can still, with agreement with your opponent, you can still play like that. The only real negative play experiences I've seen watching people play Drowned Earth have been the consequence of somebody feating like loads of times over the course of an action. And particularly if it's a leader model and they've got 3 actions, and they feat, they don't even have to be subsequent feats. And so when I designed the game, I was looking at the maths of what the chances were of feating 3 times in a row, and they are really tiny. And so I thought, that's going to be fine. But what I didn't take into consideration, and I put my hands up, it's completely my fault, is you don't need to feat 3 times in a row. If you've got 3 actions, all you need to do is feat 3 times at any stage during those 3 actions to have a crazy 6 action sequence, which might be fun for you, but really not so fun for your opponent. And particularly for people who like to minimize their randomness in games and execute a good strategy and not have the dice punch you in the face too hard. I mean, we play dice games, so if you don't like that, then you should really just play Euro board games that have minimum or 0 luck. But that's a sliding scale, and I felt that the feats were too influencing and too affecting on the game on too regular a basis.
The research showed the same, James, when we were counting up at events the number of feats that were happening during campaigns and things like that.
Yeah.
The number of people that were rolling 30, 40 feats over the course of a 4 or 5 round campaign was
and it's also just talking to people and saying what made you feel bad in a game of Drowned Earth and what made you feel good, and invariably unfortunately the answer was the same. That what makes people feel good is feating and doing cool stuff, but mostly the cool stuff was a much bigger answer than the feating. It was things like leaping off a bridge and shooting somebody as you leap past them and landing in the water. It was ambushing off the edge of a building to somebody that's jumping in midair. It was cool cinematic standoffs, that kind of stuff, and some of it involved feating. But overwhelmingly, the what didn't I like thing was when my opponent, gets a 5 or 6 point action sequence because they just get lucky with the dice and feat over and over again. So now that still happens, of course, but it'll happen much less often, and those sequences shouldn't be as long, I think. So anyway, the announcement is that I will be officially updating the rulebook and the card document to reflect both of those changes before the end of this week, and writing a blog article explaining basically what I've explained now. Cool. So I think, guys, we might be done for this week, unless anybody's got anything else. If not, I guess we will same time, same place next week.
Bring your friends.
All right, I'm going to do one last throw. Okay, it's all right. I'm a mediocre person, but I'm not in line with
Put your hand behind him, Sean, so the camera will focus a bit better.
All right, I'll take a photo and post it.
Yeah, that's right, because it's a bit blurry.
Out.
Take a photo and post it. Excellent.
He's about 85% done.
So yeah, that's
That's
pretty good
great.
going. Look, we've run over a little bit more than an hour, but I remember the last time I tried to paint a model in an hour, it was a real struggle to get a decent result. So
Lower your standards,
post
like
that. Go on.
just lower your standards, like me.
Well, but well, I mean, we need a thumbnail for this video, so take a great photo of you and the model at the same time, and we'll whack it up, and you'll be immortalized on YouTube forever.
Oh, I've been immortalized so much.
Anyway, thanks very much, guys. Thanks for participating, and thanks to everyone in chat for watching. We will be here same time, same place next week. Again, if you've got any questions, any suggestions, anything you liked about the show, anything you didn't like, anything anything you'd like to see in the future, shoot them our way, throw them up on Facebook or in the comments section of this video. So that's me signing out. Say goodbye, guys.
Goodbye, guys.
Take care.